Please welcome to the stage, to welcome your TEA Masters, John Lindsay.
Okay. So, did you catch the song that was played just before we came on? Did you hear what it was about? It was about dying, going to heaven. So I think it's about the old folks, and I thought it was very apropos. So we were all laughing back there. Okay, so I have a real joy. And this next number is a celebration of talent as we move forward. Last year, there was a program that was started about the Masters, and there were 7 of us last year. Philip was up there. Philip, are you still up there? There he is. Stand up. Ralph, you're in the house. Ralph, where's Ralph? I don't see Ralph. Anyway, all right, Ralph. So, and I think that's it. Myself are the only ones from last year. So here we go. I'm not very good with staying with scripts, but I will try to do that. So over 4 decades, our artists, artisans, and specialists are masters of their craft. And it's really about perfecting their craft as they move through their maturing of their life cycle. The nominations are put forward, and we urge all of you to participate in this process. Nominations are pushed forward on an annual basis. The International Board of Directors for TEA then reviews them and approves that slate of nominations. The Masters basically are all with a significant number of years. As you can tell, I have a few years under my belt. So, and really represent the highest of standards relative to their trade. And what's really critical about this, and what I think is so important, is at this point in their career, it's about mentorship, and it's about passing that knowledge on. So, what we're going to do tonight, or today, is we are going to recognize them, and we're going to have a little talk about their experiences as they've moved on. So, the full bios are in your handout, so I'm not going to bother reading all of them, but I will touch a little bit on the individuals as they come out. So first, I welcome to the stage International Board of Director President Michael Mercadante. Now, Michael doesn't have a mic, but he will be presenting the plaques. So the first master to be recognized this year is Philip Vaughn, artist, creative designer. Philip was raised in France, educated in England. He built his first large public sculpture in London in 1972. And in 1979, he built and sailed a boat across the Atlantic with his wife, Alice. Shortly after landing, he started with Wet Enterprises. Now everybody knows Wet Enterprises, WDI. He did a few projects for Disney, like Indiana Jones, and also art direction in the field for Tokyo. He also worked for Universal, and he also worked on an expo in Korea. He has his own company, Vertex, which he started in 1988, which really focuses on technical design and public art projects. And he continues to do that in Pasadena. Welcome. Our next master of this year is Wayne Hunt, graphic designer. Wayne started with signage for Universal Studios and the first hotels at Epcot. Wayne has designed and been a part of 50 theme parks and spanning 11 countries over 40 years. In 1977, he started Hunt Design, specializing in identity, signage, and environmental graphics programs. He's authored 3 books, and he is on the faculty of Art Center College of Design. He is also influential in Ryman Arts, the Art Directors Club of Los Angeles, Society of Environmental Graphics Design, and American Institute of Graphic Arts. Our next master is Lisa Passamonte Green, lighting designer. Since her first day, yeah, there we go. All right. Since her first days at WDI in 1990, Lisa worked tirelessly to improve the state of the art of lighting design. As CEO and principal in charge of visual terrain, Lisa has over 25 years of experience on 6 continents. Lisa has been recognized with many awards. The Lumens West Award of Excellence and the Awards of Merit, the IIDA Awards of Excellence, and a Light for the Living Award. She has also contributed to 12 TEA projects that have been awarded. Now the next one is Zolt Hormé. Zolt, sculptor, rockwork, and painter. My daughter worked with Zolt, and she just sent me a text about him. And it was really wonderful and touching, and it starts off with a line about a boy behind the Iron Curtain in Hungary. So with that was my, I couldn't go right into this. It was a wonderful note. So he speaks multiple languages, needless to say. Design, creation, and construction of themed environments is his thing. He is creative executive, Theme Finishes Studios at Walt Disney Imagineering, which encompasses 4 disciplines: rockwork, character paint, character facade, and hardscape. He's working and has a leading role on major projects in China, France, Japan, and the United States, and creating focal points such as Tree of Life and Pandora recently at Animal Kingdom. At WDI, he also is a part of the academic outreach program, teaching placemaking at Florida State University and actively conducting classes at the Institute of American Indian Arts, providing opportunities for internship. Adam Bezark, writer, creative director. Yeah, well done, thank you so much. Okay, Adam is a writer and a director. As you can see, a director, he moves things around to get them in the right place, who combines a wide variety of talents like moving things around in media and technology. His experience ranges from film and video to museum exhibits and theme park rides and attractions. In 1988, he started the Bezark Company, which, with his own team of experienced designers, writers, and creative professionals. Adam designed his own interdisciplinary curriculum at USC and continues to work with the school to encourage students who want to come into this profession. He is also a TEA spokes voice. I like that one. Spokes voice, right? Embraces new and emerging arts and technology, keeping in mind the emotional chords that surprise and entertain our guests. So with that, I have a few questions for you all. And I hope you guys do well with these. You ready? Here we go. All right, so I'm going to start off with Philip and Zolt. You both grew up in Europe, right? You speak multiple languages. And then you now transferred your multicultural upbringing and applying them to the art of theme parks, themed entertainment at large. So specifically, Philip, so you went to college, you went to University of Cambridge, or Cambridge University, sorry, in architecture. Transferred to Chelsea School of Art, right? Taught for a while. And then one day you wake up, you decide to build a boat. And then you decide to sail that boat across the Atlantic with your wife, Alice. And then what? Go into a theme park? What was that all about?
Well, I really didn't have a plan once I got to the United States. Just the process of getting to the United States was daunting enough, you know, negotiating the ocean and all of that. So, but when we got about a third of the way on the trip, we had to repair the boat in a way that cost us just about the entire budget that we had. So when we arrived in Port Canaveral, I think we had $10 between us. And so we went out and got a job like a couple of days later, both of us. And And while I was working in a sort of exhibit fabrication company, putting crates together. And while I was there, somebody said, well, there's this Disney place up the road, you know, Walt Disney World. And I had, frankly, never heard of Walt Disney World. I mean, I'm ashamed to say that now, but I had no idea that there was such a thing as a theme park. I'd never seen one. So I went out there and interviewed, and because I knew something about plastics, they hired me. And then they said, well, the first thing you have to do is go and walk around this park and find out what a theme park is. So that was a whole education for me.
Yeah, well, it just shows you got to be flexible in this business, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
All right, Zolt, right? You play multiple musical instruments, speak 4 languages. You sculpt and you paint. But you played on the Hungarian national hockey team. So how do you go from that to theme parks?
Well, let me try to compress 30 years of history into 3 minutes. Basically, when I was playing hockey, you know, as a young man, and actually I ended up going to the European Championship, which was a great thrill, you know, for somebody, you know, from Hungary. And following that, I just realized very quickly that communism didn't, you know, fit me well. So I defected under the Iron Curtain, and thank you, and left Hungary and ended up basically in the United States. My story is a little bit different than Philip's because on one of the subway stations in Paris, where we had to kind of go through the paperwork and wait, there was this big billboard that Disneyland is coming to Paris. I had no idea I was going to work for Disney at one point, but that I was aware of the fact that, you know, there's Disneyland and it's coming to Europe. So that, you know, that's just how life is, and ended up basically working for Disney shortly after I got to the United States. First, we went to Lansing, Michigan, where there was really nothing creative to do, and that's what I studied all my life. Came from a creative family, except a putt-putt golf course. So, which was a great 101, you know, a crash course to learn about construction and rock work, which I had no clue about, you know, growing up in Europe, and quickly learned how to weld, how to sculpt, how to spray cement, and all the little other disciplines related to doing rock work. And the guy I was working with, he really wanted to work with Disney. And from Lansing, Michigan, we were there for 6 months, didn't speak a word of English at the time, had to learn that pretty quickly as well, and ended up in Florida and started working on Typhoon Lagoon, which was my first Disney project, and the rest is kind of history.
I love it. Both of those stories are great stories about sort of being able to be flexible when opportunities come along. All right, Lisa, Adam, Wayne. So you've all worked on multiple continents, right? You've taken your talents to these new theme park markets. You've exported your knowledge to these cultures. So Lisa, having worked on 6 continents, could you give us some insight on your thoughts on the sort of common and unique approaches? What's different, and what's the range of diverse cultures that you've dealt with?
I can absolutely give insight, and I have to cheat and use my notes a little bit, because as people who have seen me speak at SATE before know, I get a little nervous up on stage, so I'm going to cheat. But really, no matter which culture it is around the world, every culture deserves respect, and it's our job to understand their customs and their cultural point of view when we're developing a design. When we take the time to do this, we are able to use lighting to evoke an emotional response in ways that more deeply connect to the local guest. For instance, in our experience, many Asian cultures like cooler, bluer color temperatures, and more US cultures like warmer, amber colors in their homes and in their residences. So when we're in those different markets, we really need to understand that as we're developing an attraction design, because what may be uncomfortable or scary for a dark ride in one culture is very different from a lighting perspective in another culture. So for us, we really try to look at it from that perspective. And then what I have found is every client, from a client perspective, every culture appreciates a straight shooter. Don't BS. Don't try to bluff your way through anything. They want to know what you think, what your expertise is, use that voice. And the only differences really are some cultures are more sensitive to how politely or blatantly that advice is given. And so that's really my
I didn't
answer.
realize that about color. That was a good tip. I like that one.
Thanks.
Adam, so you've worked across multiple cultures in multiple countries and across multiple mediums. How does the entertainment in those diverse audiences and diverse mediums change?
Well, it's kind of like Lisa said. Some stuff doesn't change from culture to culture. Some stuff changes a lot as you go from one continent to another. And it's really about listening. It's about becoming your audience, right? That's sort of my number one job at our office is I'm the audience in chief. So my job is to kind of be part of the effort to really understand whoever the audience is that we're speaking to, kind of get inside their heads and think, okay, what's going to ring true for you, and then try to speak to that. And when you're a writer, where I came from originally, that's super hard because words don't translate at all. Jokes in our language mean nothing in Chinese. There's no such thing as wordplay. There aren't rhymes. You can't write song lyrics the way you would. So we've learned over the years that what you really do is a deep kind of multi-step process where you start off, you create whatever it is you're going to do. You try to do it for the culture you're going to, but you have to work in the language you know. So we start off in English, but then you can't just kind of go to Google Translate and slop it over into another language. You have to find writing partners from the other language, find a Chinese writing partner and sit for weeks with them and kind of go through every line and figure out what does that joke mean. You have to explain jokes to people and for hours on end and say, no, he's being funny. He's Jack Sparrow. He's trying to be hilarious. He's not actually, trying to kill us. And then let them try to explain back to you the joke that will sort of work in their culture. It takes a long time, but you learn a lot while you're doing it.
It's the difference between interpretation and translation.
That's right.
Very true. Wayne, you've worked on more than 50 theme parks, 11 countries. How does Wayne finding...
I have a slightly different perspective, although I'll come back to where you are. If you look when our theme park culture was exported to Japan, first of all, with Disney and Universal, the product was almost identical to what we have here. And the market, we thought, wanted Disney as we do it. And that's what we built in Tokyo Disneyland, Disney Sea, Universal, USJ. It's only in the last few years that we've adjusted our concept to their cultures, right? And so I think it's kind of a paradox because they broadly speaking, want a Western experience. So to adjust it to their culture has always been a contradiction to me, and always been a bit of a puzzle. So that's one thing. But Lisa's in the subjective business with lighting, but I'm in the objective business of graphic design. You read what we do. It's objective. It's instructions. And a typical theme park will have over 5,000 signs. You count them all if you start all the time. And they're all in a language. What language are they in? Well, they're going to be in English because that's what we speak, and they're probably going to be also in a second language, which is the local language. So here we are trying to give instructions or do branding or identify rides or rules and regs in at least two languages. Well, do you lead with English? Do you lead with the local language? It's been changing for years. We've probably worked in a dozen foreign languages. I don't speak any languages but English. And here we are designing stuff in Arabic and Hangul and Cantonese and Mandarin. And it's a giant puzzle, but we have to get it right because we're actually using their language in the graphics. Yeah.
So taking that forward to your creative process as you go through it, you all lead diverse teams and you all lead a creative process as you go through it. Wayne, sort of continuing with you on this, you've written books, you're designing, you're leading a professional organization. Do you shift your process when you go from culture to culture? Do you approach it differently?
Well, I think any of us that have had meetings in different countries realize that you need a different approach when you're communicating abroad. And a meeting in Japan is much different than a meeting in Korea. It's as different as New York and Texas. And you need a different strategy. But again, I think we're over there because these cultures want what we know and what we're good at, which is entertainment design. And it's a matter of, I think, of understanding how that culture communicates so you can get your point across and get your project built. But they're all different. Working in the Middle East is a whole different ballgame of hierarchies. You're working in Japan, you don't know who's in charge. I mean, there's all these things that are so different. You don't adjust your team, but you adjust your approach. If you have any kind of history of success, you find a way to change how you communicate to how the message needs to be received, I think.
I was thinking back to Japan years ago. Philip, you'll remember when we were there in the early 80s, and everybody smoked. When the cigarette pack got picked up, you knew the meeting was over. Lisa, so you're passionate about bringing creative disciplines together, right? And the artistic aspects of how does lighting really come together with that creative process? But it's a collaborative process. And it blends a diverse talents and diverse thinking. How do you do that?
I have a team that is diverse across gender, ethnicity, ages, backgrounds, and interest. And I really firmly believe that lighting is a team sport. I'm lucky that my entire team shares my passion for lighting, and none of us are shy about sharing our unique perspectives in the lighting designs that we develop. This also means that our clients get the benefit of our collaboration. In fact, one of our designers, Rose, is up in the booth, and she's been lighting the whole event.
Well, that's what we're dying about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Some clients don't see the value of making the lighting designer part of the creative team, and my mission in life is to show them how much more we can enhance a project and bring it to life when we're brought in early on. And when we're allowed to contribute throughout the life of the project cycle, we add diversity to the project disciplines. And a lot of clients really struggle with this. And since so many clients don't see the creative value of doing that and bringing us in early, my secret weapon is to show them the fiscal value of how much money we can save on a project when we are helping to make critical infrastructure decisions during the creative process instead of afterwards in the field. So Paul Kent, wherever you are, I resonated very much with your conversation, the two Pauls, because it really is about getting into the room early enough to help problem solve and tell the story in the way that the creative's vision is being shaped.
So I'm going to go off script a little bit and talk about last night. So,
Oh, no.
you know, you and Lisa and I were talking last night about how you see what you do differently and how lighting has affected your thinking. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it's very important, obviously, to see what we build, right? I mean, that's an important thing, and also. And also, I think that lighting has a lot to do with, with the mood that you're trying to create, with, to support the narrative, the storytelling. And I think it's very important, when the sun goes down, like, for instance, if you look at a project like Avatar, for instance, in Florida, to create that depth, the feeling of depth, the perspective, and the lighting is really important part of that, so it's very important to work together, like Lisa said, to start designing together, because if, we can design whatever we want to design. If it's not lit up, it's a waste of time and money. So it's a very important collaboration that we have to kind of, nurture and perfect on every project.
So take that question, the dialogue forward, and you're working around the world, and you're working multiple disciplinary teams. Are you changing your approach when you go to these different locations to talk about how you put together your projects, how you create these environments, how you create the immersive entertainment that you do?
It is a very interesting, honor, if you will, that we can actually work around the world, and we have to be extremely sensitive to the different cultures that we're providing entertainment to, and as a result, we have to kind of really understand how they feel about, our product and how we can slightly adjust it to that particular culture we're working at, whether it's Shanghai or Hong Kong or Tokyo or Paris or even East Coast, West Coast, United States. It's a little different. So we're trying very hard, and we kind of touched upon today on communication, how important that is. I mean, we all know that even in the same language, we can misunderstand each other. So add an interpreter into the picture to make sure that you can convey your direction as clearly as possible. And the interpreters play a huge role in that when we work outside the United States. And it adds really another layer of creative thinking and working on your communication skills to make sure that you really convey what you want to convey, to the people, who's working with you.
So when we did Shanghai, right? You remember we had almost, 6 months, a year of training program in front of it.
Correct.
Was that program different at all between what you would do in Florida and Shanghai?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, all those artisans bring a set of talent that's different from country to country. The Japanese artisans are definitely a little different from the Chinese or from people in Hong Kong or Paris. So we have to kind of really focus on how we can get the most out of the local artisans to make sure that we can always stay, in my particular case, at the Disney, level of quality, and make sure that we can deliver a product that's always, the best we can possibly, create. So it plays a huge role where you actually work and how you can adjust your system and your way of working, from country to country.
So Philip, teaching and creating, right? Running your own design company. How do you shift your thinking as you go through these various roles? Do you take a different approach?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different environments, so to speak. I mean, if I'm a painter in a studio, generally I like to paint completely by myself, and I don't like to have other people around when I'm doing it. When I'm teaching, obviously it's a completely different environment there, and you're communicating and discussing things with people. When we work like this in the theme park industry, or in my case, I've done a lot of museum exhibit design also. There's a whole team of people in there, and the product is not the product of one person. The product is the accumulation of the whole discussion and the process that goes on with sometimes hundreds of people, but often it'll be 10 or 15 people in the room. And so learning to work collaboratively with those people is a whole different process. And to me, it's fascinating, actually. I really love it. But it is quite different from the other two disciplines, the creative, the solo creative and the teaching.
The constant shifting of gears back and forth, which is actually really refreshing, right, as you go through that process.
Yeah, it's fun, yeah.
So let's bring this conversation full circle back around to what this is all about here. And it's really the discussion here, and the title of this, the SATE, is really about discussion of diversity, right? In your organization, diversity in the themed entertainment industry. You look at the trends that are out there. Hopefully this set of faces will look different to more match the demographics of the world.
A little more even
Yes.
in terms of representatives.
That's right, exactly. So when we were talking about topics to discuss, this one really became sort of light and lively. So light and lively it is. Here we go. Lisa, you provoked us a little bit, but I'm going to start off with Wayne. You are president of several, or have been, and are president of several trade organizations. How is this issue of diversity changing and transitioning? How are you making a proactive statement when you're dealing in these organizations that you're active in?
Well, I think first of all, the creative organizations I've been involved with, like TA and others, are sort of inherently diverse anyway. So we don't have quite the challenge you would have in engineering association or legal association. So we've got a pretty good base to start with. But the talk about diversity is really a relatively new topic in the last 10 years. It hasn't really been something that was top of mind. It was always sort of an undercurrent. Now we see a kind of proactive approach from organizations, especially at their leadership level, who they're recognizing. I think at the membership level, I think creative organizations are already quite diverse. And if you look at art schools, they're super diverse. I teach at Art Center, and it's 58% women and 38% Asian. And so I think we have a very diverse sort of general culture, and I think the organizations reflect that. And I think when I saw the topic of this conference, I thought, man, that's a little bit much, have a whole week about diversity. But the presentations today have been so good and very thought-provoking and very interesting. And so I don't have anything that I know that we're doing as a strategy. I just know it's a kind of bubbling up cultural phenomenon until Lisa raised it. We weren't really thinking about it yesterday, right? And Lisa goes, all these old white guys on the stage.
Old white guys.
So I said, Lisa, you come back in 2040, it'll be a different bunch of masters. It won't be.
So
yeah.
to that point,
Yeah.
if you look back 20
Yeah.
years, if you were teaching that same class 20 years ago,
Yeah.
would the demographic look different?
Oh, yeah, totally. Our Art Center was 80% white young men in 1970 who wanted to be car designers, and they wore ties. And I've been there 40 years, one day a week, and I could see this whole arc completely change in that time. Yeah.
Excellent. Philip, you've seen it for 4 decades in our industry. You've known both the big corporations, the studios, the big studios, and the community that feeds the themed entertainment industry, which is a bunch of small individual companies to medium-sized companies. How have you seen this change? How do you see these organizations changing?
Well, I think the advent of the TA, the founding of the TA, really coincided roughly with the Korean World's Fair, the Daejeon World's Fair. So this is mid-'80s, something like that. And it also coincided with the end of Tokyo Disneyland. And you probably all know this, but at the end of Tokyo Disneyland, there was a huge layoff at WDI. And people like Monty Lundy, president of Technifex, and a whole lot of other people got laid off and decided to go off and start their own businesses. And when we were working at WDI, we just dealt with our own discipline. We didn't have to worry about legal things. If you were a sculptor, you didn't have to worry about legal things or contracts or those kinds of things. Suddenly, when you've got a small company, you got to do all of this. You got to do shipping, you got to do contracts, you got to do negotiations, all these things, most of which we had no training in at all. Right. When I went to art school, they never talked about any of that. So it was a real learning curve for me, and I think for everybody else there. But this industry is now really mostly made up of small companies feeding these Universal and Disney and obviously overseas clients too.
So Adam, building on that, you write and direct, and are you changing your stories to address diversity?
I think they're changing us, right? The stories are coming to us, right? You put yourself into the story you want to tell, and it tells you what it wants to be. So again, not only is the makeup of the folks behind the scenes evolving, the story material is changing ahead of us, and we're just kind of rushing to kind of keep up with it as it tumbles ahead of us, which is kind of cool. And it's much more interesting material because it's growing and changing in front of us. And the voices in our shop and our office who are helping us tell the stories are changing. It just makes the stuff, the content more interesting, more fun.
Are you doing it in a proactive way, or is it just naturally happening organically?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes.
Yeah, it's kind of both, right? Like I said, some of it just finds us because the material is just automatically pushing you towards more interesting stuff, and some of it is we are sort of actively looking around and saying, all right, where can more voices come from? Because we've been telling the same stories for a long time. It's nice to change it up. It's nice to hear what new voices to say. So we have young little kids, just babies, coming into our workshop, into our office, who are amazing storytellers who have completely different takes than I would have had, or than any of my peers would have had 2 years ago, 5 years ago. It's just changing that fast.
So, Lisa,
Yes.
as the woman on the panel,
Really?
Shocking, right?
you want to reflect on the white older men on either side of you?
I do want to reflect. And I want to reflect.
She's been reflecting for about 3 weeks.
For 3 weeks now, I've been reflecting. No, I was thinking about this question very hard after I raised it, of course. And in the early days of my career, I was frequently the only woman on a project. So that in itself is very unique, because I would venture a guess that that's not true for all the people I'm on stage with, that they were the only one of their type in those meetings. And in fact, in my really early years, I worked on a project where there was an executive who didn't believe women should be on construction sites. The entire team went to great lengths to keep me out of his sight or hide me from view and keep my very existence from this lovely leader. And this worked. I'm not going to tell you who it was. This worked until we were on a site walk one day, and he asked a question that only I could answer. And it was like the seas parted, and I was ushered up to the front and very politely answered his questions. And then the sea closed again, and I was swallowed up and sent to the back for the rest of the walkthrough. But at the end of the walkthrough, the team realized that I needed to be there on all the future site walks, and I needed to be present for all of these meetings. It was very early in my career, so it had kind of a profound effect on me and how I have navigated my way through the industry ever since. So clearly, we've come a really long way since then, right? I'm very excited about how far we've come since then. But we still have a long way to go. And it's still all too common to have a room full of industry people that do not reflect the diversity of our society at large, or even the guests in our parks. It's not enough to be accepting of those who come to us. We need to reach out to attract people who might not even know the industry exists. Thanks. And we have to be less afraid of hiring people who might not seem like a good fit or for our company culture, and hire people who are less like what we see in the mirror. When I talk to the young people at my company, they often say that they are welcomed into the TEA, but they don't feel connected at the TEA events. They're often welcomed into an event, and then they're left alone. We need to be better as an association at not just talking to people who we know, or people who we work with, or people who can hire us or bring us a project. And we need to actively converse with the new people we've never met before, even if we don't think we have anything in common, because the one thing we most certainly have in common is a love for theme parks and to be immersed into a good story.
So that was a lesson for all of you about people coming into this industry. You got to welcome it in. Yes, everybody? Yes, John.
John.
Yes, John. All right. So I'm going to shake it up a little bit and say, okay, follow right behind that. You just got a proactive statement about what we got to do. So, Adam, over to you. What do we got to do?
Well, I think I'm grappling with the old white Jewy bald guy guilt and trying to get my head around the fact that I think it's okay to be the old white bald Jewy guy, but the trick is to really hold the door open for all the cool people coming in and really, and like you said, throw our arms wide and bask in the fun of having new voices around us.
But is there a proactive statement other than opening the door?
Advocate for this. Spread the word. Tell it's. I think it is about what we kind of do anyway. I don't know about you, but I cruise these things like a predator, looking for the next fun person who can be part of it. And I'm looking at interesting looks in eyes, people with the sparkle in their eyes who are hungry to be part of this. That's the proactive part of looking for faces and voices I haven't seen before that will change things up.
Wayne, what would you do as a proactive statement?
Well, first of all, Lisa totally cheated. She had notes.
I did.
Yeah? And your boy?
I mean,
You're a master now.
No
Come
one
on,
said
go
no
with
notes.
well, it's hard to top what Lisa said, and I don't really have a strategy other than my little office of 18 to 20 people. All the years has been super diverse. I mean, it's probably as diverse as any office I know of, and so we practice what we preach. I don't know that I have any insider strategy to open the doors wider, other than not closing them up and recognizing people who have talent or who have interest or the sparkle in the eye. Although I can't see anything out here, by the way.
There's
So, blinding lighting here. So I mean, it's just something we all have to do and think about. And look how culture's changed since 1960 or 1970. We saw some images today that were very scary about 1962. I mean, what a cultural change since that World's Fair. And then that's 50 whatever years ago it was. So I just think we need to get on board and push things forward. And I'm not much of a missionary, but I don't want to be the opposite either.
Philip, anything to add to proactive statement? Proactive statement to move the needle.
Well, to move the subject from the male-female spectrum to the resident, to the citizens and non-citizens, I've always been very interested, because I'm an immigrant myself, I've always been interested in people that are coming from other countries who have something to contribute to this. And a lot of people that do come here have taken, a fair amount of effort to get here, one way or another, and especially these days, and so I've always been interested in trying to help foster those sorts of people, and I've found that people with a sort of international interest, at least, do quite well when you put them out in Mongolia or to have a discussion with, the Communist Party boss there about his theme park. They're inclined to be more interested and more flexible about it, And so I think that's, nowadays, especially since we do so much of this work in countries overseas, that's really an important thing to have,
So you come from a very different background in the beginning, right? From hockey and all that other stuff to coming forward to today, right? I mean, how do you make it more proactive? How do you make it? What's your statement to say, when I go back next week and I'm in the office, what are your statements that push this issue forward?
Well, I do have to say that us as a company work around the globe really helps, to kind of nurture diversity. On my team, only on my team, and the team finishes, I think we have about 13 to 15 nationalities working together on a daily basis. And I'm teaching at the Institute of the American Indian Art to provide, Native Americans an opportunity to come and work with us, and whether they do want to work with us or not, that's up to them. But the idea is to educate them how to present themselves, how to, get by out in a big world like, Philip was saying that, we don't learn those things, with the company. You have to learn it on your own as far as, representing yourself, contracts, all that stuff, negotiations, so on and so forth. So I do a lot personally because I believe in diversity and I believe in the fact that more cultures can work together, more wealthy the team is, more we can contribute, to the product as well. So I'm a very strong believer of nurturing diversity for sure.
So when we were in Shanghai, this is Shanghai Disneyland that we're talking about, and Zolt's team was about 100 people, I guess it was over there, right?
Roughly, yeah.
And it was wonderful. You went through, you had the local Chinese group, so you walked from Chinese, discussion to, there was the French group, there was the Japanese group, right? There were the sort of Southeast Asian group, right? And it was wonderful. It's truly multicultural. And they were all the painters and the carvers. Mm-hmm. And they really came from all over the world and worked as one. And I think, your statement about your team is made up of these multiple nationalities is so true, so true.
And it's kind of fun because we speak all these languages together. And, if you walk into my office, 5 minutes is in French, the other 5 minutes in English, then a little Japanese thrown in there. So, it's a fun group to be in. And like, for instance, when I had the honor to work on a Tree of Life, I really intentionally wanted to create a team that's very diversified. So we had, I had Native Americans, Irish, French, Afro-Americans, and some local artists as well. So it just, within 10 sculptors, we had, 4 or 5 different nationalities working together. And I just kept going at it since then, and will be.
Yep.
Art doesn't have borders, right?
Yeah, right?
We have borders, but art doesn't. So when you let art be art, it kind of takes care of itself.
John, can I go off script for 1 minute and say,
We've been off
Wayne,
script for the last 15
I know,
seconds.
but I haven't because I'm putting my notes down. So I know I'm not sticking. No, I want to just say, because Wayne and Adam and Philip are also not just colleagues and masters, but they've all been clients of mine at different times. And Jolt and I also work together collaboratively. But Adam and Wayne in particular, all the years I've worked with you, I think, Wayne, you said something a minute ago about you didn't realize that diversity was still such a big topic. And I think that's because innately, you've always had a diverse company. I've always worked with females in leadership roles in your company, alongside with all of your teammates. I've worked with a very diverse group of people with both of your companies. And same thing, Adam. So I think for both of you, I love that it's a conversation that I had to prompt a little bit, but it's so natural for your workforce and your teams to be diverse and unique and creative that you don't even realize that it's still an issue.
Oh, thanks. But also, honestly, the groups in our office are the women and all the folks in our office keep the subject alive. Susan Beth Smith, our executive producer, is a ferocious mixer of people and brings all kinds of cool people into the room every day and makes sure that everybody gets heard. It ain't just me. It's just kind of built into the process.
So Lisa, you started people asking questions of each other. Do you masters have questions of other masters that you'd like to put forward? Think about that. Well, I'm going to ask you one more round of questions. Unless, Wayne, you have a thought? No? Oh. He's got to hold that thought. Philip has a thought.
Going on with this diversity thing, that I think there are groups within society that tend to be way underrepresented in our industry. Like African Americans, for instance, we see relatively few of them, and I don't know why that is. Maybe certainly when I went to school, I had no idea that an industry like this existed, And I think maybe we haven't done a good enough job of explaining that this is a very cool industry, that, all sorts of different people, electronic engineers, mechanical engineers, designers, actors, lighting people, writers, there are all these different types of jobs within this industry. And I think a lot of people are not aware of really how interesting and how diverse it is. And I think we should be doing that. We should be going to schools and talking about it and saying, this is a cool industry and it's well paid.
Yeah, I agree.
So last Tuesday, we did, was it Tuesday last week? It was Tuesday last week. We did CalArts with the masters of last year. There were 6 of us there. Philip, unfortunately, was unable to be there. But it was about 150 people, about half students and about half working professional. And the students asked the best questions.
Yeah.
And were so engaged, and it was so light and lively and so energizing. It was just wonderful. And I think to that point, it is incumbent upon us as an association to go out and actively engage with the schools, actively engage with the community, bring the community in. Because, think back when you chose your profession. It was because there was an opportunity that you were exposed, right? And if you're not exposed, to your point, if you're never exposed to it, how do you know it's something you want, that might interest you?
And it happens in high school, probably.
Yeah,
a lot of it.
Exactly.
I mean, by the time you decided to go to art school, you've already set yourself on a path. A lot of people will say, well, I don't want to go to art school because they don't make any money, in the art. Partly true, right? But, I mean, this is an applied art industry that really has, tremendous amount of opportunities for all sorts of different people, actually,
So that reminds me of in the presentation I did last week, there's a wonderful statistic, and it's in the blue book that is out there. I don't know what it's called, the one that's the economic book. 7% of the equivalent of 7% of the world's population went to the top 10 theme park operators last year. Think about that.
That's a lot of people.
That is a staggering number, right?
Yeah.
That's just the top 10 operators. This is a business, and this is a business that has really grown in the 4 decades since Epcot. Go ahead, Lisa.
But we are kind of a secret business, right? Like, everybody, I'm sure, in this room has the same experience. You tell somebody, I work in the theme park business, they go, I didn't even know that was a thing. They look at you like you're weird. You have lobsters growing out of your ears.
Sell popcorn?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you make roller coasters? No, I don't make roller coasters. I make rides. Well, I never thought anybody made those rides. I thought they were just there. What do you mean? We sweat, we die, we break our fingernails for you. Because people don't understand that it's a thing that requires all this discipline. And I think it has, like I said, the dam is finally cracked. And I think it started at the university level, that schools like SCAD and Florida, down the Ringling School, and Art Center and CalArts are finally sort of offering programs to people about this so they can get in on it. And now we're finally seeing the wave of new blood that we've needed for so long. For a long time, if you went over to Disney at lunch hour, man, the hair got thinner and whiter year after year, right? And there was this big generation gap. Like there's nobody 40 in this business, right? There's people 50 and over and 30 and under, and there's this whole missing generation. I don't know where they went. We're all under 40, but I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about
we didn't talk to them at the events.
Right? There was no TEA to sell them.
There was TEA, but we didn't do a good job of shepherding that middle group into the events in the industry.
We didn't have a next gen.
So we need to, the next gen program didn't exist. And so they're a little bit of a lost generation.
So all you kids, stick around. Yeah. We need to hire you, please.
So I'm also going to say this, that not only is it incumbent upon us to do that outreach, but it's incumbent upon you to continue to show up. I didn't go away when that executive didn't want me on the construction site. I didn't disappear. You have to continue to show up and be somebody who is seen.
Yeah.
So that's up to you.
All right, so we've got 7 minutes left. I'm watching the countdown clock over there dutifully.
Well, what are we going to do?
Yes, that gives you 1 minute each and then a minute to, something at the end of this. So I'm going to roll down the line here, all right? And think about wisdom that's been given to you. You know, we've all had mentors, we've all had mentees. It's wisdom either that came to you or that you've given others. Think about that, and I'll start with you, Philip. So, what words of wisdom have you acquired over your 4+ decades of doing this?
I didn't have anybody who really sort of gave me one particular piece of advice that was really, that motivated me. But I think that the fact that this is such a collaborative business is really the difference between this and many other kinds of businesses. The fact that you work as a writer or as a creative designer with an electronic engineer and mechanical engineer and an operations guy, and the fact that all these people are working together and are involved in even the early parts of the concept meetings, it to me is a really fabulous thing, and it's something that takes a little bit of practice to learn how to do properly, for everybody, I think. But I think it's a really exciting process, So you need to be flexible about it, but.
Well, for me, my first real boss was a guy named John Follis, and while he didn't give a lot of give me advice, by demonstration, he taught me one thing that I always forget. He says, don't be afraid to be the designer in the room. You're there for a reason because you know something and can do something. And that's to your point about taking that hard hat off and saying, I'm here on the site. And he said, don't be afraid to be the designer. And I thought, that's great. It's a calling and it's a gift. But,
I say that over and over to people, you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Right? No matter what your job is, you're here for a reason. Participate.
You're in that meeting,
right.
Say something.
Participate.
Yeah.
All right. Lisa?
I thought about this one too, and mentors for me come in all shapes and sizes. So Leota Toombs was a mentor to me, Peter Chernak, Monty Lundy, I'm going to miss one, Dave Taylor, who's from the show lighting group at Imagineering. They were all mentors, and they all taught me so many different things. Monty and Dave still mentor me today. So I would say, look for those sounding boards and those people who can help bring different perspectives, that it's okay if they're cross-disciplinary. I know a lot of times people come to me and they think I can only mentor them in lighting, and I think I have a broader perspective on that after all these years in business. And my mentors really taught me to think out of the box and have confidence in my voice as a designer and as a business person, and to kind of rebel against the safe path. I didn't take the normal route that lighting designers took. And so that was with a lot of mentoring to help usher that new path forward.
Bill?
Well, now that we mentioned names, I was very fortunate to have a mentor who was John Olson, was in the industry, and he kind of embraced me and really ushered me along, truly like decades, really, until he retired. So that was very fortunate for me, and that was really an example that really affected how I conduct myself and the business. And my goal is to be not just John Olson, but a little better, to be able to teach young people, to be able to share everything I have learned over the years, and really help the industry to have a new generation come in and do what we have done for all these years. So I think it's a wonderful thing to do, and to be able to do. Teaching, there's nothing more rewarding or nothing better in the world than teaching another person.
And that's what the mentors and the masters is about, right? Is about that, passing the knowledge down. Adam.
Shit.
You're never a loss of words. What's going on?
I was trying to, you guys all had good ones. I don't know. We all have had a lot of mentors, and they all tell you different things along the way. The very first sort of mentor I had was the great Bob Yanni, who ran entertainment for Disney for a million years, and his mantra was, the show starts at the curb. And I had never heard that as a kid before, but that was sort of my first idea of what immersive entertainment meant, is you start right down to the very first detail from the moment they set foot onto your property they're yours, and you've got to tell them a story and be true to them. That was pretty cool. And another great guy was the great Larry Billman. He was a great writer, director, show director for Disney Entertainment for many years. And he basically told me, get over yourself. Do you actually think you're like the best writer who ever set foot on the earth? I went, yeah. No, dumbass, you're not. You have to be part of a team and make your writing work with what everybody else is doing and not assume that you know all the answers. You have to be part of figuring things out together. And I don't know, I guess the most inspiring thing I ever heard was from Ray Bradbury. The most amazing week of my career was probably a week spent with Ray Bradbury working on Disneyland Paris, and he just sat around and drank and told stories the whole time. But we all went, wow, that was amazing. And his great line was, jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. Right?
Oh, I like that.
Right? Just go for it, and you'll figure it out as you go. And I think that's what this whole business is about.
I got my piece of advice from Orlando Ferrante, and many of you will know Orlando as the grand man who really was, the partner to Marty and WDI or WED Enterprises. And when I went back, my third time back to Disney, I would go have lunch with every quarter or so. And I would always bring the question of the day to him. And he would go off with the answer, and he always had a great answer. And then he closed every single one of them the same way, which was, if you get the right people together and you empower them and you get them working together as a team, you'll be fine. So it's all about teamwork, and it's all about getting people together and collaborating. So with that, 3, 2, 1, our time's up. So can we have a picture of the masters? Where's the photographer?